On this episode of Sega Talk, we get lock and loaded into the criminal underworld of Virtua City and break the case of Sega's 1994 revolutionary light gun shooter Virtua Cop. We look at its history and legacy it left behind. All this and more on Sega Talk.
SegaBits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to Sega Talk number 141. I'm your detective host, George, and with me is Detective Junior. Is there like a minor, like a smaller, like not the biggest detective, but like, you know?
You could just say my partner.
My partner. There you go. My partner.
Yeah, there you
Barry.
go.
That sounds better.
Hello, kids.
And in the game, there's two characters, right? And one of them is nicknamed Rage. Is it Rage or? And then they own Smarty.
You're gonna tell us. I don't know.
Right. But what would be your nickname if you had to use one? Like, I feel like these are not good enough nicknames. Like, I feel like you could do better for your own nickname, wouldn't you?
I honestly, I thought their names were like simple things like Jason and Sheila or something.
Right, but they gave them nicknames. That's the thing in the game. But, like, what would be your... Okay, you can't... I have to give you a nickname, right?
Right.
Right. I guess it should just be Nomad. I mean, you already have Barry the Nomad. That'd be... Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Patreon, because this is a Patreon pick.
It is. Yeah, so this episode, this is a Patreon pick. It's actually a pick from Nicholas Schaefer. And so if you haven't heard, I don't think you mentioned it, this is Virtua Cop is the episode.
Right.
I guess at the intro you do, but yeah. I always like to go in fresh. But yeah, so Nicholas Schaefer picked this one, and because he's the picker, we get to read his memories at the top of the show. And we actually had a lot of memories for this episode.
Oh yeah, so this is a popular game.
Very popular. So here's what Nicholas had to say. He said, "This was an absolute favorite of mine at the local Pizza Hut. I've never been a big light gun guy, but something about the aesthetic of this game just drew me in. I spent countless hours and bags of quarters on this game. It saddens me that this franchise doesn't get more love and new games." And yeah, so Nicholas, he is a Patreon picker. He's at our special tier that it's basically like a producer tier. You pick what we cover. And we have a small but mighty group of Patreon pickers, and we want to grow it. So right now, we have Zachary Ross, Bobbert, and Nicholas Schaefer. And this is Nick's pick. It's a Nick pick.
Yes.
Next one's going to be a Zach pick, and I'm waiting on a Bobbert pick. So hopefully he submits something. So if you're listening, submit it. And if you're listening and you haven't, supported us, we have a lot of tiers. There's $1, $5, whatever. Check us out, patreon.com/SegaBits. That's the only ad you're going to get for the rest of the show.
And today, of course, like Barry said, we'll be talking about Virtua Cop, a 1994 light gun shooter developed by the iconic Sega AM2 studio and supervised by Yu Suzuki for arcades, specifically the Model 2 arcade board. The game would later get ported to Sega Saturn in 95 and Windows in 96. The game is known for being the first textured map polygon action game, which is technically true because Daytona USA was a racing game. You could check us out talking about Daytona USA on Sega Talk number 3. So
wow.
Way back. So Barry, what is your history with Virtua Cop? What version of the game do you have more of a history with?
So I feel like it's one of those games I probably encountered in arcades, but I'll be honest, Time Crisis kind of muddies those memories for me.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I've probably played more Time Crisis than Virtua Cop, and it just kind of runs together. I honestly think I've probably played Virtua Cop 2 or 3 in arcades and probably never saw 1. The first time I really played Virtua Cop could have been the, if I'm not mistaken, the Sega Smash Pack for Dreamcast, which includes it. but I also did get a Saturn in 1999, and I have Virtua Cop disc only. I went to a used game shop in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, I think, and they had disc only Saturn games for like $1 to $5 each.
Nice.
And I snapped up every AM2 fighter. I snapped up Virtua Cop. There's actually like a lot of like iconic games that I look at my shelf and I'm like, man, I wish I owned that. And then I look at that CD wallet and I'm like, oh, right, I do. I just don't have the big chunky box.
Right.
But yeah, it's, you know, it's a cool game. As we've said before about AM2 games, they're very basic, but that's the great thing about them. Like,
right.
If you want peanut butter, you want something that just tastes like peanut butter. If you want a light gun cop game, you're going to want Virtua Cop. Like, that's just how it is with AM2. It's not like, you know, I want a cop game, but I want them to time travel, and I want gimmicks, and they'd be like, oh, check out Time Crisis. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
To me, the Sega Saturn version was the one I played. When I got my Saturn, it came with Virtual Cop, like as a bundle with my. I didn't buy it in the store. I got it from a friend, and he owned it with D and a few other games. And this is obviously the easiest one as a kid to pick up and play, right? Even with the Saturn pad, it felt great. The graphics were incredible. The directing of the camera was incredible. It really caught me off guard. And I think I appreciate this game way more because before I played actual House of the Dead before. So I kind of already had like I've already played this kind of attitude back in the day. But when you actually see how much this invented of modern light gun games, especially compared to like, well, we'll see. We'll get into it when we get into development, but you'll see what game this game was compared to at the time, and you're gonna kind of laugh because there is no comparison now. I think every new game gets compared, light gun game gets compared to Virtual Cop or House of the Dead because of this game. So before we get into the actual meat and potatoes, I want to give some credits to some people out there that actually came out and have new information that made this episode possible. The first one is Patrick, who did a recent interview for us with the main programmer and designer of the game, Akihito Hiroyoshi. Check out his interview on our website. It feels kind of like the Obama meme, giving myself a medal, but Patrick did all the work. I didn't do anything, and I'm glad he did it. The next one is a Retro RGB interview by Saturn Dave, who talked to Kinji Tosaki, the guy that kind of created all these, the light gun, the VMU, the 3D Saturn pad. Very cool interview if you're into Sega's peripherals. So if you're into that, check out that interview. The next one I highly recommend. It's Pandemonium's 4.5 hour documentary on Virtual Cop, going super deep, too deep that even hard cut, it's 4.5 hours longer than I think 2 Lord of the Rings movies in theaters. So yes, definitely check it out if you guys have time. It's incredible. He did a great job. Big kudos to him.
Nice.
So, game credits for this game. Yu Suzuki is the supervisor, while the main designers in this game happen to be, we talked about the Corey interview, Patrick interview, the Katsunori Itai? I can't even say his name. Itai? Is that how you say his name?
Itai.
And Hiroyoshi, who was the main designer. Sega AM2 would go on to create the game's iconic targeting reticle and the zoom effect, and according to them was inspired by a Japanese coffee ad, Poca coffee ad, which was oddly enough featured actually the voice that would go on to do the Navigator's voice in Sega Rally was in this commercial. And I do wonder if they just like poked him out of the commercial, or if he just happened to, that he was the voice, just happened to be a voice actor. People have actually found the ad, and it's right here, the first video we're going to be watching. Do you have it?
Yeah, let's check it.
All right.
Bye.
So that's some good coffee. So that ad created the whole system that kind of made Virtual Cop iconic. It's kind of hard to like even think that there wasn't a system like that before Virtual Cop. The reticle that just like continues to zoom down. It was so iconic that, and the zoom in that on enemies that every game uses nowadays. It's insane that it just came from a coffee commercial. So, do you see the inspiration here for Virtual Cop?
Yeah, I absolutely do, and I think it's a great gameplay UI addition because it really not only is an on-rails game, but it also focuses your attention on certain areas, but it never misdirects you. It very clearly is saying, it's almost like the Spidey sense. It's like, this guy's about to shoot you, and the color, it's peak like AM2 user interface design.
Oh, yeah.
It's so simplistic, and it works so perfectly. I think anyone picking up and playing this game is going to immediately recognize it, and I think it's so much better than like words flashing on the screen saying "look out," or "move left." You know, it transcends language. You don't need to translate that. It's really great, and I feel like you see that a lot in Sega games, like things that just seem like obvious, like the arrow in Crazy Taxi, something like that. Like that's a really amazing addition. So much so that, remember, they had a copyright on it, and they sued Simpsons.
EA, I think it was the publisher.
Hit and Run, no, Road Rage.
Right, and I agree. This is one of those moments where it's iconic. Not only that, it does so many things. Like when it starts zooming down, you're going to get with the color code. You're about to get hit, so it makes you time which enemies you should be focused at, and it does all these things just based on like such a small amount of data. So I think it does that really well, and it's crazy to think that this wasn't an addition in. This wasn't in light gun games before. They were all kind of more like Duck Hunt, where something just came out, the screen kind of moved sometimes. It wasn't as dynamic as this. So, what inspired the game Virtual Cop? Obviously, now we know that it was buddy cop movies in the 80s that inspired the look and feel of the game. Some people say it's Lethal Enforcers, which we'll talk more about because magazines used to say that this was a Lethal Enforcers clone. And I know you like Lethal Enforcers, or was it that? Yeah, you're the one that said it last time in one episode, right?
Yeah, I have the big box.
Okay.
I really love that. I love anything in a big box, so of course I'm going to love that.
So you know more about Lethal Enforcers than I do, so we'll talk about it a little bit. But first, let's look at these 80s action movies, Barry. Out of these lists, which ones have you seen, and which ones do you think kind of vibes more with Virtual Cop? Because to me, Lethal Weapon is the one I always think about, but maybe I'm missing a few here. Because there's a lot of 80s action movies. Like buddy cop movies, I'm in.
Right. Am I supposed to look at a physical list?
Oh, I have the picture on the on the notes.
Okay,
Sorry.
I got it.
My bad.
Yeah.
Police Story from Jackie Chan is listed here, and I was like, I guess I never really thought of that as a buddy cop movie, but it technically is.
That's a great movie. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if it's inspiration for Virtual Cop, but
for our audio listeners, I'll just run through them real quick. So we have Tango and Cash, Beverly Hills Cop, Lethal Weapon, Red Heat, 48 Hours, K9, Turner and Hooch, Stakeout, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Running Scared, Police Academy, Lethal Weapon 2, Midnight Run, The Naked Gun, Dragnet, Colors, Black Rain, Feds, Alien Nation, which is not really.
Not really, yeah.
Shakedown, Dead Heat, Police Academy, another one of them, Collision Course, City Heat, Surfer Fuzz,
and
Police Story, and The Goat.
So, what was up with these buddy cop movies that the buddy was a dog?
That's long been a genre. Like Disney did a lot of them
Right.
in the 50s, I feel. But yeah, some of these are really iconic. Some of them are absolutely forgettable, and some are just terrible.
So, which one reminds you the most of Virtual Cop? Because for me, it's always Lethal Weapon. It's just the guy that's the bad boy in the Force is definitely the lead character of this game.
Right. It's hard for me to say because I feel like it's anyone who's. I almost want to say Police Story actually because I feel like it's someone who's really committed to the job and they're really out there to fight the bad guys. I feel like with some of these, especially like Midnight Run, Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, even Beverly Hills Cop, it's like people outside the system they're like a part of the system, but they're always on the edge and they like might lose their job at any moment.
Right.
And I feel like Jackie Chan, Police Story, and even one that kind of comes to mind is Last Action Hero.
Oh,
where
yeah.
it's like they're
That was a 90s
super committed to the role.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of the Police Stories came out recently on Blu-ray. There's like last year, like an insane amount of Jackie Chan stuff hit Blu-ray. It was great.
Police Story, if you guys haven't seen it, definitely a recommended movie by Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
Well, 3D polygon light games is a no-brainer today. We've literally just had a House of the Dead, 5 years ago, so they're still using this formula.
Right.
You really can go into a new modern light gun shooter and not assume it's going to be 3D. But people forget that when Virtual Cop was being built by SEGA, the world's first textured polygon map game. So here's a first screenshot. So Sega's the first one doing this. Before Virtual Cop, the light gun industry was chasing digital actors in games due to the success of Lethal Enforcers, which was a top 5 grossing dedicated arcade game in 1993 in the USA. During early press events, Next Generation magazine would call Virtual Cop the Lethal Enforcer with polygons. And I think I have another picture. Oh no, I don't. I thought I did. I think this one. If you look at the bottom of this screenshot at number 6, page 6, it literally says this is a Lethal Enforcer clone, basically. The reviewer of the game of the
Weird.
footage.
Hardly.
You played both. Do you think it's a clone? Like, if you were a press person and you were going to an event and Sega invited you to play Virtual Cop, would you first think, playing Lethal Enforcer in 1993, the year prior, that this is a clone or a ripoff or an inspiration?
Not at all. I mean, Lethal Enforcers was really, it felt a lot more like a static Mortal Kombat light gun game.
For sure, dude.
And it outside of playing the role of a cop, like there's nothing to really compare it to. It doesn't have that UI that's so iconic. It's not 3D. It's really, if anything, it's like House of the Dead.
Right.
And I mean, this came first, so House of the Dead is really a horror take on Virtua Cop.
Right.
So it's not fair to compare it to anything. I think just like, I guess what I'd say is like, you look at something like Virtua Fighter, and that's just bringing fighting games into 3D, but never would you say, oh, it's a ripoff of Street Fighter. You know, like,
right. Even though
it's
right.
the genre.
Right. I agree. And I think when you look at Lethal Enforcers side by side to Virtual Cop, it really shows you how more dynamic the game got. And there is actual directing with the camera and the way it moves around the stage, that it actually makes it feel more action-y compared to Lethal Enforcers, which is more of a shooting gallery with digital actors jumping out of nowhere.
Right.
So I agree with you on that. I don't think they're the same. I think they were so ahead of the curve, people didn't even know how to explain what they were seeing. So they just kind of said, it's like Lethal Enforcers. That's what I think. But let's talk about the arcade. In the end, the arcade actually came in 3 different cabinet designs. The most popular being the middle one in this photo we're seeing here. The one with the thug on the side. Though I hear online that Virtual Cop 2 is a lot easier to find in the wild, compared to the first game. I'm assuming it's the same thing with like Afterburner. They came in like Afterburner 1 and 2, or you know how they always do those super hang on and super hang on, and they upgrade so fast because they come out in like 8 months that almost all arcade cabinets just upgrade to the latest one, and they don't get the old one, and just happen to be with Virtual Cop 2 because the sequel is a direct sequel. Like it's using the same polygons on the some of the characters, right, on the sequel.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So do they have this in Galloping Ghost Arcade? Because I've never played it in the arcade, the first game, and I'm wondering if they have it there.
I don't think they do. They have all of the House of the Dead games except for the latest one. They have LA Machine Guns and the game like it that I'm blanking on. Let me see. I don't think they do. And they're nearing 1,000 games, so
Jesus.
You know.
That's a lot of upkeep. Do they have like multiple people there that like upkeep their consoles?
Oh yeah,
I mean hardware.
They have a whole like team of, I think, contractors or freelancers who they employ. But yeah, I'm looking at their list of games, and as far as Virtua, no, they have Virtua Fighter 1, 2, 4, and Virtua Racing. They don't have Virtua Fighter 3.
It really shows you how rare it is. They don't even have it. It's like you would think it would come up, right?
Right, and I don't know if you have it in the notes, but in our Discord DMs, I actually sent you a link to
I didn't actually get it. Let me see it.
Rare bit of merch. Mm-hmm. So if the big cabinet is rare, this also is equally rare. It's called I don't remember what this line is, but they are little capsule, or I should say, I think they were available in UFO catchers.
Oh, in Japan.
In Japan, and they're this big. I actually have them. I don't know if you can see it in my video, but they're right there. There's 2 little Astro City minis behind me.
Right.
And they're so tiny, and these pop up on eBay from time to time for like $400.
Wow.
But they did 2 or 3 series of them. Again, I'm blanking on the name of them, but
this is Virtual Cop 2 too, though. Oh.
It's Virtual Cop 2. It's not 1.
Boo!
But and Space Harrier.
Yeah, no,
but
Space
look
Harrier.
Look at those
nice.
cute little things.
It's literally the repurposed cabinet too. You can tell, like it's one of these, right? It's this first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the middle one. I think the thug picture in the side is pretty cool for the art. And I like the little marquee on top, the Japanese one in the middle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you see one in the wild and you guys could buy it, it'll probably be worth a pretty penny. You could sell it to Galloping Ghost Arcade since they don't have
Absolutely.
it. So let's talk about the story and characters. Barry, can you read the really short story here in your best detective voice?
All right, here we go. A detective in the player's department uncovers an illegal gun-running operation and traces it back to a powerful crime syndicate named EVIL Inc. He compiles a large amount of evidence and is ready to take them down, but he is discovered and assassinated. Some of the evidence manages to make its way back to headquarters, and a special task force is put on the case. The policemen Michael Rage Hardy and James Smarty Cools must face that organization led by Joe Fang and his followers Kong, the King and the Boss.
So, obviously, the story is very basic and to the point.
Yeah.
First of all, like, let's talk about the 2 characters that you play as, and they're really ridiculous, like, Japanese-American, they think it's cool words, like Michael Rage Hardy. Like, it sounds like a porn name, first of all.
It does.
And then James Smarty Cool, it sounds like the guy.
I like that name.
Like, this dude sounds like he smokes menthol cigarettes, and, like, that's what it sounds like. But,
he probably does.
What is your thoughts on the story? It's very bare basic Sega AM2 stuff that we're kind of used to in Afterburner and all that. I don't even think Afterburner even has a story. So, what do you think about it?
I think it's fine. I think it's a little cartoonish, or actually it's very cartoonish. I feel like with Virtua Fighter, they really got into the lore. It seems like there's a lot more there than you can see on the surface. But here, it's cheesy. It kind of reminds me of Dynamite Cop. Where it's like the president's daughter was kidnapped.
That's like Resident Evil 4 story. It's like, you got to go rescue my daughter. It's like,
right.
All right. Okay. I'm by myself. All right.
But the names are silly. Evil Inc. is just ridiculous. Virtua City, as we'll talk about, is kind of cool, though. I like that. I like to think that's where all Virtua games take place.
And it's something that I think SNK does a lot better than AM2 ever did, was like the whole idea that they have these cities and these fighters from all these other SNK games all live in other cities around there.
Right.
Was it Southtown or whatever? Capcom does it too. Sega seemed like they were trying to, but they never really got that far into it, especially since the whole Virtua name has been kind of not as popular. But
right.
Well, that's the accepted what we just read is the accepted storyline. There is also a Japanese ultimate virtual cop strategy guide, and you can see Pandemonium's big video. He does a really good breakdown of the story. I just have bulletin points. So the game takes place in Virtua City, a high-tech city that is has a virtuous city plan being pushed primarily by evil corporation, which means has more people flocking to the city because of the tech. But I you know what? First of all, it's not good when the corporation that is helping you is called Evil Corporation. I think we could agree that's not a good name for a business, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's not very subtle.
No, it's like Google just calling themselves evil. It's like, okay, too much on the nose. But
right.
Virtual City has a population of 200,000, just in case you wanted to know. And it's powered by high-speed subways and trains that allowed speedy commute to help the city grow, so you could come in and out of the city fast and easy, which I don't think it's ever has anything to do with the story, but thank you. But under this nice city, there is a illegal gun smuggling and manufacturing operation happening. Jonathan Hardy is an investigator for Virtual Police's second department, which is a callback to Sega AM2, and is investigating when he follows the lead alone and ends up missing. He leaves behind a blurred photo, but not enough evidence to have a big, full case. His son, Michael Hardy, joins the Virtual Police upon graduating the academy, and obviously is disliked and is considered hot-blooded, why he gets the name Rage. So there's a few things. He shuffles through departments, and he finally has a small unit in the second department, like his father, Sega AM2 callback too. And the only other person there is James Cools, and they work together. James Cools is supposed to be like the opposite kind of your main character. Your main character, Jonathan or Michael Hardy, is more of a kind of like a Ryu character. No Time for Girls, all about his task on getting his revenge for his father. So the beginning of the story has you guys investigating this gun smuggling operation in the beginning of the game. So that kind of there's also lore behind the reticle. So James Cools likes to use these virtual glasses that let you see the icons and shoot people, so you won't shoot civilians. But Michael Hardy doesn't like using it, but actually uses it in the beginning of the game. That's why you guys have the reticles. So I thought that was kind of interesting little lore, that they're actually glasses. And if you actually see the art, especially in 3, they actually do have glasses on. So what is your thoughts on like omitting some of this stuff? I mean, obviously it's too much info dump to be in an arcade game, but you think it would be cool to like have it as unlockable notes or something in the Saturn version?
It would be nice. Yeah, I feel like we just recently did an episode where we talked about a game that had very light plot. I'm trying to remember what we just talked about. I'm actually blanking on Game Ground. Yeah, that's another game where it's just like they throw it at, it's another arcade game. They throw the player into it. There's very little exposition, and the gameplay is fantastic. Oh yeah, but it really could have been brought up a little bit more, like elevated a little more, if they had given the player something. And I think I said then too, I appreciate how a game like Fantasy Zone, which is so bizarre, does give the player like a bit of text before the level starts. And it would be nice to say like, this guy and this guy are going after Evil Inc. because of this. Done. You know, like,
right.
would have helped. And I think you're right, too, like, with the Saturn version. And I think this is something that happened later on in gaming. Like, arcade ports would just kind of happen, and people were fine with that. But then I think later on they're like, oh, the arcade version, or the home console version, you collect notes, you collect diary, you know, like, there's all this collectible stuff. And I think this game definitely would have benefited from, like, police notes that you collect or something like that. One game that comes to mind that's awesome is Burning Rangers, also on the Saturn, but very late in the lifespan of it, where they had a lot of cool lore that you could collect and learn about.
Another rare game. I think any Saturn game we talk about is technically semi-rare. I don't think Virtual Cop and Long Box is that cheap either anymore.
Oh, really? I gotta look it up.
Maybe it's like 40. I don't know. Is that considered cheap for Saturn?
I think anything that's like retail or below is
cheap.
A fantastic price. Yeah, it's 50.
Okay. It's harder to find.
Actually, not bad.
Yeah, it's a I mean, it's short, but it's a good game. And as far as the lore in the game, I really dig this kind of stuff. It's very anime-ish in a way. I wish they would be able to find a way to add this to the Saturn version, but the Saturn version was so, I guess, rushed because of the failure of the first Virtual Fighter game. It wasn't a good port, and people were waiting for Virtual Fighter 2, which was taking longer than expected. So they needed to get a game out there, and I think this is a great conversion. I mean, it's very bare bones considering what they could have added, all this lore. But it's still a fantastic port, so I highly recommend it. But let's talk about the gameplay in the game. This kind of is what makes these games, right? Is the gameplay. And the gameplay is very simple and has no real... Like, I don't think you really need that many instructions to be able to play this game. I feel like if you go to a bar and you give someone the light gun and say, play with me, they would be able to play the game and you don't have to hold their hands. I feel like even the reloading, maybe tell them that you have to shoot off screen for the reload in the arcade would be the most. But the game has also pioneered the idea that you could shoot people in certain parts of the body and they would react to that. But sometimes it did really make the game feel more satisfying than those like motion picture games, because you would just shoot them and it was always the same reaction.
Right.
And this one you'd be able to shoot them in the leg and they would react to the leg. And also, if you aimed at certain parts of the body, it would give you a higher score. You would want to aim at their guns to get a justice shot, which is considered to be the way to play the game, right? To get the highest score. So,
right.
First of all, Virtual Cop was built as a realistic cop game by the advertisement because Virtua did. Because of the whole Virtua angle of the game. Do you think seeing the gameplay here, it was really realistic? I feel like it's like super soft in violence compared to like House of the Dead 2, you know, like realistic, not really, but it's
no. I mean, if you're talking about like actual police work, I think a game like maybe Judgment is a little more like realistic because it's you know, there's action, even though those RGG studio games are like over the top. Like least there's a level of investigation going on. Or Phoenix Wright, he's not a cop, but you're investigating. Whereas here it's just a constant shooting gallery. But I think the Virtua element comes into play because you know you can shoot various parts of the body and they react, which is very cool. And I think that is very comparable to Virtua Fighter and how they really, you know, set a benchmark for realism in terms of all the different moves and how players would respond, even though those games have like a woman made of metal, you know, like liquid metal or whatever.
As for realistic, I think a lot of people, when they think of realism like this, 3D, they think that the violence is too much for your child because they're so realistic the way you shoot them. But like, I feel like this game is kind of cartoony in a way where like I would be a-okay with my kid playing it because the violence is very Looney Toony, I would say, where you shoot them and it's like a blue little thing, and then they kind of like do spins in the air, which are unrealistic, obviously. So I don't think it's that realistic in that way. I think it's just fun and smooth, and the game and the characters act more realistic compared to the past, for sure. So also, the game is one of those easy to play but hard to master. There's hidden weapons. So at the beginning, you have 6 shots, I think, your first gun, but then you can upgrade if you know where they're at. And the game's also very short. I think it clocks in at about 30 minutes. It only has 3 stages, but obviously it's one of those arcade games you want to come back, memorize where everything's at, and try to hit and get the high score. It's one of those games you're supposed to play more than once. I think that's something a lot of people forget when they talk about these type of games. And
right.
Of course, there's the practicing your justice shot and not shooting civilians that take away points or lives. They take away one of your hits. So what is your opinion on short games like Virtua Cop? Do you think... A lot of people used to make fun of these games where, like, PlayStation had RPGs that were 80 hours long, and then they're like, oh yeah, you got Virtua Cop. Cool. It's like,
right.
what, 30 minutes? Take longer
right.
dumps than that, right?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that the other day, and how I was like, I wish there were games where as soon as you boot them up, like, that's the game. You know, like, it's done? Like,
yeah,
like the game's done. Because I played Virtua Cop to prep for this. I hadn't played it in a long time, and it just, like, I got the full... I didn't complete the game 100%, but I felt like I got the full experience. It was very satisfying. And then I looked over at my shelf of, like, RPGs that I own and haven't played and may never play, and I'm like, it's such a big ask of me to put that disc in the machine. Right. You know, like, I know, and especially there's some RPGs you put the disc in and you're like, I gotta clear out 2 hours because there's no way I'm gonna be able to save until it gets through the whole, like, opening cinematic and all this nonsense. And I just love a game that when you start it up, you get right into it, you can be done in 10 minutes. You know, maybe you died, but at least you got an experience. And this is not a knock on longer games, but it's just, those don't exist. Games like this don't exist anymore. You don't get to experience games like this, and it sucks. I want more games. Make games short again. You know,
I think. I mean, you have to understand, this game is designed for people that are in a lunch break or going to they're in restaurants and bars. Most people don't want to be playing a 5-hour game. They just want to shoot things with someone and put $1 in. So I think this is a perfect game. I think it's you get far enough in the game, even if you're not good. Like, the first stage is really, really easy that I feel like anybody should be able to beat it. Or get far enough in it that it makes it feel like it was worth their quarters, and I think this game does that good enough.
Right.
Also, I was going to ask you, are you good at delivering those justice shots? How are you on that? And and what's your well, we'll talk about the method of use, but are you that good?
I'm good at it. I think the reason being is that my my play space and my stunner cable is not that long. So I'm not like cheating like with Duck Hunt where you're putting it right up against the screen, but I feel like I realized I didn't have to close one eye and really aim all that much because I was pretty close to the television set. Like, I was basically where I am right now from the TV. But to be fair, that's about arcade accurate.
Right.
I think when I was a kid playing like Duck Hunt, I thought you had to be really far away. And now that when I go to arcades, I'm like, oh, like gun games, you're actually very close to the TV. So, yeah, it's pretty easy.
And I think the game is and the game is pretty forgiving. I think on the justice shots, they kind of give them to you. You're good and close enough that it makes you sometimes feel like a boss when you're probably. It's not as pinpoint. And I don't know how accurate the light gun is. I've never really done deep tests, but I feel like it's good enough to have fun. I think they know that. So let's look at 2 characters from the game. I think we just literally talked about them, but outside of Michael Rage Hardy or James Smarty Cools, who do you think you would pick? Because I feel like they're not that popular compared to what's her name on the sequel. Like, she's the most popular character. So, Michael, Rage, or are you more of a Smarty Cool's womanizer?
I will be honest, the game does not really tell... You don't see them.
Right, that's what I'm saying too. It's like, it doesn't really
It's
matter.
not like House of the Dead where you get them in the cutscenes. There's absolutely zero evidence that they exist in the game.
Right.
Are they in the game?
I don't know.
Does Virtua Cop have cutscenes where you see them?
I think so in the beginning. In the beginning of the game, you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like you never see them, so it almost doesn't matter.
Well, I have some. We'll talk about it later, but I do have some steals like this. These were CGI renders that they made to promote the game for the Saturn. If you look at the early arcade renders, they were all blocky, kind of like Virtua Fighter 1, like more in-game assets. These are obviously the game does not look like this, so, but it's a cool way to promote your game, definitely. But I don't really care. I'm like you. It's like, whatever. I'm just going to shoot people anyway. So they could have been white guy number 1 and white guy number 2. It doesn't really, it's the same to me. But
right. They could have made it a blonde woman, but they didn't even go with that.
Yeah, they could have made it a blonde woman. I mean, yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't.
If there's one critique for Virtual Cop, it's that it's a short game only featuring 3 stages. And I guess we could talk about each one of them, right? Because there's not that many of them. And, of course, I lost my... Okay, so the first stage is the black market dealers, which is the warehouse. The black market, Arms Black Market, it's called. And according to this... gameplay's not even playing. Play a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the stacks of crates in the dock warehouse district. Keep calm here. A hasty trigger finger could be your downfall. This is iconic stage. I think this is the one everyone remembers when they play the game, 'cause it's the first one. So it's like Green Hill Zone for Virtual Cop.
Yeah.
So definitely iconic. Yeah, I like it. Everything about it is iconic. So stage 2 is the underground weapon storage. Is this the here things start getting ugly. Axe-wielding thugs charge you from up close, and other slime balls lob grenades at your and other weapons at you from their hiding places. Pick off upcoming projectiles to save life markers, and watch out for the rampaging construction equipment. Cool. What do you think about that description and that level?
I think the level's fine. I think it's an interesting pick, though. I feel like if you were going to do a Virtua Cop game, I would think it would be like city, warehouse, like abandoned house. But this game's just like a pier in the middle of day, a construction site at dusk, and then like the headquarters, which I guess I would expect.
Right, yeah. I do.
But it's very weird, the selection of levels.
And if we did this episode of Shinobi 3 about how well the levels make a layout and tell a story within that layout. This one feels like they wanted to do more. They just didn't have enough time to do all the 3D assets. And so they had to be like, all right, here's 3 levels. And then they had 3 other levels that they just saved for the next one. And having 3 levels became kind of a staple for the team, because every Virtual Cop has 3 levels as far as I know. So, I mean, that's how it goes. So, the last one is Gang Headquarters. Welcome to the Syndicate Headquarters. Time to flush the head rat from his hole. Engaging in guerrilla warfare amongst jungle of desk computers and helpless hostages. So, very dramatic description of the stage. They call them the Syndicate. I thought this is the first time I ever heard the Syndicate in notes. So yeah, I don't know. Just thought it was interesting. So let's talk about the Sega Saturn port. Which I feel like is probably the most popular way a lot of people played this game. But before we talk about it, let's look at the covers for these games, and you can tell us what your favorite cover is. So we got the first one is Virtual Cop United States long box. Has the iconic characters Rage and Cools, Smarty and Cools. And yeah, I mean, it's a long box, has a CGI renders. It really tells you a lot about this game and that it's CGI, which I mean, it's 3D, which is important for Sega.
Right.
This is the European cover. I really like the sunset in the background.
Much
it really,
better.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
adds more dynamic, dynamic.
And you get
cool
the full
feel.
logo with the badge.
Right, cool. And this is the Japanese one, which has a red background, not as cool. Same render in all of them, just used differently.
Right.
So, and then the last one we have here is a prototype cover for the American market, which is just a thug.
Good lord.
This is the worst one. We could all agree.
That looks like a mega Master System game.
Exactly. I think they were going for Master System vibes with the prototype here. Obviously, we could all agree. Thank God we didn't go with this one. So the render is used 3 times in different covers in different ways. The American one makes Rage, Mr. Hardy here, the big character, with the second player is smaller.
Right.
The other ones, they put them same size. Which one do you prefer? Because I really like the European one, even though they're kind of small.
Yeah. I think on one hand, the European one, they get lost in the picture, but it also feels like the legitimate real image.
Right.
However, I have to wonder if the European one actually like painted or recreated the feet, because look at those feet. They're like clown shoes.
Oh yeah,
they're huge. And notice they're not on any of the other covers. They end at the ankles. So I'm wondering if these renders, if that's the true render, or if they had to do some like artistic
liberties.
I don't know what, but it almost looks like AI generated feet, you know?
Right. If you look at the Japanese one and the American, they kind of end at the same spot. They're all different color though. Like the Japanese coloring on the bands and stuff are gray, like their knee pads. And the American, they're like different color gray. It's weird, but yeah.
Oh, it is a little different. And then of course, I don't know if we'll talk about the box art for the gun. But I have the gun.
I do have the gun. We'll talk about which gun you prefer because there's different colors. American got orange, so you got the American one. Is it American? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But they do. It is Virtua Cop, like 100% on the back. You almost think you'd get the game with it, but nope.
There's a bundle. There's a bundle with the game. I have the bundle with the game, but
for America.
Yeah, they did American bundle. Well, I have a picture of it, so I'll show you.
Yeah, this is actually dead stock.
Nice.
About 14 years ago, maybe, when I was living in Philadelphia, this store had like 8 of these for $10 each. So I bought 2 of them, and it was like brand new box.
Should have bought all of them because
I should have.
They're so expensive now.
Back then, buying 2 was like good enough for me. I just wish they were blue. Or like I wish I could get a blue one.
You can, and we'll talk about it. Yeah, technically can, but yeah. So just a year after the release and becoming the biggest arcade hit, Sega released the Sega Saturn port. And unlike ports of like Daytona USA, Virtual Cop actually knocked it out of the park. Since the start, Sega AM2 has admitted in recreating the arcade experience meant that they have to bring home the light gun. Bringing the arcade. So one of the biggest reasons the Sega Saturn was so popular in Japan was because they really did bring the arcade experience home. And here's them first showing off the Sega Saturn release at the Tokyo Toy Show in 1995. Do you have the video?
Yes, I do.
I'll press play now. So first it's remix, and then it's Virtual Cop with a guitar. You can see here the black gun. And it's like slowing down right there, but whatever. It looks incredible. Yeah. Obviously, it drew a crowd. I think it would draw a crowd when this is one of the first 3D games like this. But yes, so there you go.
Very cool.
Yeah. What do you think of light guns and the light gun that came with the Sega Saturn? You played more of it than I have. I haven't played for it within years because my CRT died. you still have you need a CRT to play basically the original gun. They have obviously
You do.
walkthroughs now where you can use a camera.
Yeah.
Or I don't know how those work. To be honest with you, I haven't really looked into them, but they're like $100. They're not that bad to play them on modern televisions. But I think it's only on PC though that you have to use an emulator. I think.
I'm trying to open it. Get the fuck out. Give me this.
So, since we're talking about the light guns, the designer, Kinji Tosaki, told Retro RGB some secrets in designing the Saturn light gun. First of all, due to high popularity of the game, including the gun, Sega had trouble securing electronic parts for the game, so Tosaki had to create a brand new board to put in it to deliver the same performance, but with a completely new circuit. So I'm assuming there's some some of the guns running his board and not the official board. I don't know if it makes a difference. Oh, you showed the gun? You're on camera.
Okay, here's the gun.
Beautiful.
I honestly like the colored versions more than the black one because the details pop. It's a lot like the like how the black Sega Dreamcast and the white one just looks better just because you can see all the details of the lines and everything just a lot easier when it's not an all black item. I really like the Sega embossed here. I love the design of it. It's very light, which you want. Like, you want to hold this for a long time. You don't want to be like, oh, my wrists hurt. In the start button here, it just makes sense. Like, you can hold it and then you're like, oh, pause, It's just a wonderfully designed product. I think I prefer this to the Dreamcast light gun, even though I love that you can snap the VMU in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Actually, it's an iconic gun. It's right there, but with the phaser.
Yeah.
So I know you just said that it's light, but did you know that the game that they actually designed it with empty AA battery slots inside that don't do anything,
interesting.
But all they do is actually add weight to the gun, so you can feel more like the arcade experience. Tosaki recommends only putting batteries in the grip to it says it gives you better aim and it's more closer to the arcade experience.
What about weights? Why batteries when they're not actually being utilized?
This is something I talked about. My brother asked me about the same thing too, and I'm assuming it's just because they had a lot of like battery clip, like the little like modules you put in.
Yeah.
Everyone has batteries lying around, I'm assuming. I mean, obviously in the 90s, so it would be easier to just put those in and have people clip them in and so they won't move, instead of making your own weights and then having to sell the weights and distribute them. That's what I assumed. But you could open it up in the inside. There's pictures that I'm showing on the screen right now. It lets you put a battery under where you're supposed to cock it, and one in the handle. So very cool. Obviously, you didn't know about this. Are you going to try the AA battery trick now that you know about it?
I'll try it. Hey, look, you can see inside of the gun. You see that?
Well, yeah, it's a gun. You're supposed to be able
Yeah, but you can see all the way back to the little sensor.
Oh, yeah, you can.
You see that?
Yeah.
That's kind of neat. Yeah, I might pop it open. I have 2 of them, so why not?
I don't think you'll break anything. I looked at the pictures. You guys see them. You're looking at them, and it looks very simple. I do wonder what the other board they used. Tosaki made. The difference between them. That would be interesting to see. But anyway, talking about light guns, let's look at the different regional light guns, and you could tell us what you prefer in terms of looks. So the first one we have is the one that you have. This is the pack-in box that I'm showing here on screen. It's the orange one from America. Iconic. Barry has it. The blue one is in Europe. So they got the second player blue or the first player. I don't know how that goes.
I love it.
So you could technically have the arcade setup with both guns, one blue, one red if you want, or orange, or if you really wanted to. And then Japan this is the Korean one that I have a picture of, but it's the same one in Japan.
Yeah.
The black one. Which one do you prefer? Do you think black is too realistic?
I just think it doesn't match the arcade game. Like,
Right.
when you look at the arcade machine...
Which is weird, right?
Right. It feels like in Japan they would have had, like, red and blue 2-packs.
They probably
and the black one would be in America.
But it's funny because when I was looking online, a lot of people seem to modify this one and enjoy this one. There was a guy that modified it so you could have a rumble, and it has a light. So when you press the trigger, it lights up like it's a gun, and it rumbles. And I'm like,
that's interesting.
That is really cool. Like, obviously that's in the arcade because that's how light gun games play in arcades. But
sorry for the noise. I'm putting my light gun.
you're putting your weapon away.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Outside of the colors, obviously, which one is your favorite looking gun? I know you said you're a big proponent of the. It's orange, right? I don't want people to give.
It's like reddish orange, I guess. I would say I like the American one just because I feel like blue is so expected of Sega. And I like the look of it. I think it really pops with the red gun. But having said that, I really want the blue one now so I can have a 2-player setup. I do have 2 stunners, but they look the same. So, not as exciting.
Too bad they don't have 3 players on it. You'd be able to buy the black one too, and then just.
That'd be sweet.
But you know what? I haven't. I'm assuming that they're the same mold in all of these, but it would really piss me off if the blue one is like slightly different, and you're like, oh, no. But
well, remember we experienced that with the Dreamcast because they never released the official Dreamcast gun in America, so we had to rely on Mad Catz as being the official gun.
I hate that name, Mad Catz. You already know you're going into garbage back then when it was Mad Catz.
Right. So I had to import. I imported the Japanese Dreamcast gun. I love it. I don't love it more than this because this one has more length.
Right.
I think though my favorite light gun, to be controversial, is actually maybe the Philips CDI one.
Whoa.
Because it looks like a big ass like Wild West gun.
Yeah, the revolver.
Because they made it for Mad Dog McCree.
Right.
But I do really like the what is it? The Justifier? Is that the one that came with the Sega CD?
Yeah. I think it's Justifier. Yeah, Justifier. Sounds like it. Sounds like a gun from Dredd. Judge Dredd, like a movie or something. Like, I got the Justifier.
Right, yeah, it's the Konami Justifier. So, but I can't say that's my favorite because it's not a Sega gun.
Yeah, it's true.
So
you don't want to get lynched. Well, the game does have a cool gun. The team also did a great job supporting the controller. I played mostly with the controller growing up because I didn't have the gun, so I never had an issue with the controller. But it also supports the obscure Sega Saturn mouse if you wanted to play it that way. So what is your preferred way of playing Virtua Cop?
Light gun, no
light
question.
Gun. Yeah, if I had to choose, it was the same thing. It's like light gun. But if I didn't have a light gun or didn't have a CRT TV, I would say you're still okay with playing it with the mouse and or Saturn pad. I think it's easy enough to play. It's zoomed in enough that it makes it easy to shoot the bad guys.
That's fair.
Virtual Cop is also one of the games that started the whole Sega graphics library, which was meant to help third-party developers make Sega Saturn titles easier. The Sega Saturn only launched with manuals, while documentation on the PlayStation was more pronounced with more support from Sony. Sega launched this to help them get similar performance to those games by Sega AM2, for example. Being a Saturn owner, did you notice the difference in quality of like Sega AM2 games compared to other developers not even in Sega, but just third-party developers?
Yeah, I feel like when I look at my Saturn shelf, like a lot of the third-party stuff's kind of trashy, and I think it's probably because they just did not have a grasp on the Saturn tech, or they were just straight-up ports. Like, I feel like a lot like with Nintendo, Sega really gets the most out of their own hardware. So you can't really fault the third parties for that. I feel like maybe a contender would be Capcom in the Dreamcast era. I feel like they really had a great handle on the, what's it called? Naomi, right?
Naomi, yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think it's usually that way, but like I feel like compared to Mega Drive, in Genesis, where you could see a couple of titles here where you're like, oh, well, this guy's really figuring it out. Saturn didn't really have that phase, in my opinion. It was like some of the worst games, and then all of a sudden you'll be like,
right.
Even back then when I didn't know what Sega AM2 was, like I played Virtua Fighter 2, and I couldn't believe like what even if I like even Tekken, I was like, it's kind of like Tekken 1 and 2. I'm like, you can't really compare it to Virtua Fighter 2. I thought it was ahead. Obviously, Tekken 3 came out, and then but I think it's cool that Sega did this. I think, but you could tell that Sega AM2 was probably the best developer on the Saturn, and the way they talked about it in magazines, I remember Yu Suzuki quotes just saying like, "Oh yeah, most people it's just more powerful than PlayStation." He would always say, and I'm always wondering, is it true, or are you just saying this because you're getting beat by the PlayStation? I do wonder. I guess we'll never know, right? PlayStation had so much lifespan, and even if it didn't have more power, even if the Saturn was more powerful, sadly, the PlayStation had the most games. So, all of Sega's graphics libraries were written in C and were simplified common tasks, most notably to render texture 3D polygons. Obviously, the game to be the biggest showcase was Virtua Fighter 2. While Sega put a lot of work into the Sega graphics library, only a handful of games took advantage of it. And hopefully I don't mispronounce some of these Japanese games, but Virtual Cop, Virtua Fighter 2 took advantage of it. Fighting Vipers, all Sega AM2 games that we're seeing here. Nights into Dreams, Do Donpachi, Battle Gariga, I can't even know how to say this game. And Radiant Silver Gun. Are you surprised that more games did not take advantage of Sega's graphics library?
I mean, I don't know. Like, isn't the Saturn hard to develop for?
Right. It's hard, but like Sega gave these people like actual like, oh, this is how you render 3D polygons, and this is how you do this, and these are graphical libraries. So they made it easier for them to make fighting games, shooting games, and only a handful of really obscure Japanese developers like Treasure took advantage of these libraries they put hard work into.
Was this only in Japan though? Like I feel like Sega of America was more focused on, some of their struggling add-ons to the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, that's another thing too. The 32X was out at the time, and for some reason it was like, if 32X failed, it would make Sega of America look bad. So it was a horror show. Definitely, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
So I think it's sad that we didn't get a lot more games. I felt like making games easier to develop for made the Dreamcast, like all these failures they had with the Sega graphics library. I feel like they kind of gathered all this information, and when they launched the Dreamcast, they actually had documentation that it was worth it, and it was easy to develop for, and they learned from it, and that's why we had the slew of all these games. And I feel like they wanted to do this with Virtua Fighter 2 and these other 3D games, and it just didn't happen, sadly. And it's sad to see, but I love the Sega Saturn, so sad to see. But yeah, the Sega Saturn port was essential for the console, since the console was starving for 3D games at the time, and it actually did help boost sales. The game did 300,000 units in Japan in its first week. Sold more than 500,000 bundled copies by 1996. By the end, the game sold shy of 1 million units in Japan and USA, 987,362 copies to be exact. Are you shocked that Virtual Cop 1, not just 2, put them together, but 1, sold that much for the Sega Saturn?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, it's iconic. I know the Saturn did not didn't do too well overall, but yeah, if you're gonna have a game that's like a system seller, for sure, Virtua Cop.
Right. I feel like Virtua Fighter 2 took a lot of the storm away from it because of how big it was, but no, I agree. I'm not too shocked that it did that. I'm more shocked that like almost 500,000 people, like half the fan base that played Virtua Cop, owned a gun. Like they
Right.
bought the gun bundle. Like that's crazy attach rate in my opinion. So let's look at some of the gameplay of the Saturn and the arcade original. This was filmed by Thor Stone Gaming. So thank you for doing the side-by-side comparison. So, as you can tell, the Saturn is blurrier, lower resolution. The PC is way higher resolution, obviously. Obviously the right is Model 2 and the left is Saturn. What is your opinion on the graphics? Did you notice this as a kid? Or, I mean, it's too hard to notice how much cleaner it looks in an arcade, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't have the arcade to compare to, and they definitely would not be able to do a side-by-side for decades because,
right.
You just didn't have that technology unless you wheeled a TV in and actually compared.
And plus, our CRT TVs were already blurry to begin with. So was it our memory that was false? We'll think or is our TV just crap? But obviously, it's running at lower resolution now that you can tell. But I still think it's a great conversion. It does everything. It feels the same. The camera movements.
Right.
So I have no complaints about it. I think it's incredible that they got this to get this close, considering Space Harrier 2 and Space Harrier 1, like the Mega Drive exclusive. There's leagues there. This is not that far apart, in my opinion.
No.
Right. So let's talk about the PC port of the game. So the game got a PC port because in the 90s, Sega had a deal with NVIDIA. They had an NV1 chip, and they wanted to, which was a total bust, by the way. And one of those ports that came out to PC was Virtual Cop in 1995. Since the N1 was actually based on the Saturn, or Saturn used NV1, I'm not sure how that works. They had this arcade port to PC. Have you ever played this port, and what do you think about it?
It angers me that it exists.
It's the thing that I don't like about it is there's no music. At least in the ones I've been watching the gameplay online, it looks stretched. It does look sharper than the Saturn version, but I don't know. I just don't feel like I would want to play it on PC. Like, I think light gun's essential. Mouse is actually probably too easy in my opinion, because you're just you're just playing click on the screen, right?
Right.
So, I don't know. I'm mixed about it, but I've never played it, so I can't really say anything about it. But the gameplay looks fine, in my opinion. It looks like a stretched out version of the arcade version. Is it a travesty? I don't know. But play it on Sega Saturn, please, guys.
Right.
Or arcade if you could find it, but obviously we're not going to do that. We're not going to find it, so
hard to find the arcade version, so... Yeah.
Let's talk about promotion for this game. So Virtual Cop had a pretty big promotion. It actually had ads even in Poland and in Denmark, in Australia, places we never think about. But first, we're going to be talking about the Model 2 ad. Oh man, this thing didn't even get the ads. Oh, actually, they're in the end for some reason. But here's the Model 2 ad. It's a Japanese ad. It's fine. It uses the renders. And it actually does have legs on this one, so maybe they weren't painted on this ad.
You're right. Okay. They're just weird-looking feet.
Very action movie looking. It has the little cool... I wish the screenshots were bigger and they played up more, that it's so realistic looking. But it's a cool Model 2 poster that owners got to promote the game. The second one is the U.S. Saturn print ad. And here during this time, Sega actually had a 40% cut in advertisement, and you could tell right here they're trying to advertise as many games in one ad as possible. Virtua Fighter, a baseball game, Sega Rally, and Virtual Cop, and it all kind of gets lost in a way. It's not as punchy as the other Sega Genesis ads, like the Sega does with Nintendo ads. So
right.
What do you think about this ad? Do you think it's effective or nah?
It's all right. Like, I see what they're trying to do. I feel like every Sega console that came out, Sega of America would try to be like, here's our stable of characters, and this one's probably the weakest
Right.
There's no Sonic, which is just mind-boggling. Like now, like you're not going to put Sonic there? Where's Sonic? Where's the main series Sonic game? Oh, you didn't make one? Like what the...
Sarah Bryan is... I
don't know World Series Baseball, but I love the other 3 games. But let's be honest, like the Castrol Sega Rally Car is not an iconic character. It's no Daytona Hornet. Virtua Cop guy looks goofy. It's weird how he's holding the red light gun,
right, from the arcade
instead
game.
of his black gun. Sarah Bryant, I think, is the best, but it is odd how they paint them with the polygons, whereas the baseball guy isn't. Like, I don't know why you don't depict them as real people.
Right.
It's weird.
There's been a lot of like, I would call these like crossover ads, right? Where like, so there'd be, so with the Dreamcast we had the It's Thinking, and then they had the life inside the Dreamcast. Like, this is totally not up to that par. It's not as catchy.
No.
So I feel like it's very forgettable, and I think they could have done better. But the next third one, and I think a lot of these ads could have done better, showing off the 3D graphics. But the last one is that I picked is the German ad, and this one's the worst.
Bum, bum, bum.
It just says bum, bum, bum. First of all, making me feel like, oh man, I spent all my monies in the quarters. Now I'm a bum. Thank you for letting me know.
Is that the sound of gunfire in German?
I think so. But there's no screenshots of the game. Notice that? So you don't even know what you're even doing. And then the lettering is so small on the bottom to read what the game's about. No bueno.
Not good.
Trying to see. Oh. Let's watch the ad for the US. So the US actually had a ad. Mm-hmm. Can you believe it? So we'll watch that one, and you can tell me, do you have it up?
Yeah.
I'm gonna press play. Cops. They don't even look like the game characters. Whoa. What do you
How
think
many
about
seconds of gameplay was that? I'm gonna go back and count.
It looks like maybe 2 seconds. Yeah,
less than second and a half.
A second and a half. If you round it up and we're like being nice, then it's more of them walking to the door. I felt like it should have been them looking at each other and then opening the door, and it's just gameplay.
That's a terrible commercial.
Terrible, I agree. It should have been them coming up to the door. Like right away, the first start of the commercial is them looking at each other, opening the door, then it's just the 3D graphics of like all the shooting. And that's it. And then
Ridiculous.
It's just at Sega, and then end it. That's it. That's all you had to do. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The advertising for the Sega Saturn just was not there. And I don't know how I'm gonna play this next video, because the way that it's from Sega Retro.
Yeah.
And it's like this weird formatting, but I'll play it the way I can play it. This one's a Japanese one. You can tell me what you think. It's 15 seconds too.
脳天直撃セガサターン
これが 3D ガンシューティングバーチャコップバーチャガンとセットで新登場
SEGA.
What do you think you saw there?
Well, I feel like the first half is something they probably tacked on to a bunch of different ads. I don't think there's a relation there. It's almost just like a weird intro. The last 7 seconds are actually quite good.
Right, I agree.
And you know what? You're right. You can see the characters.
Right.
I just don't remember seeing them.
It's so forgettable. There was no like cutscenes compared to like House of the Dead, where they make you remember.
Right, or dialogue. We're like, how can this happen? But yeah, I think it's good. I mean, if these 7 seconds were in the American ad, I would have liked it a lot more.
Agreed. The next, it's the French ad. This one's 29 seconds. I'll play it. This is, I think, a mix of games, I think.
Yeah.
These sound
3 games for free, right? Or
I think so, yeah. You know French or what?
Yeah.
So they're giving it away for free.
Un poco français.
Nice.
Yeah, that's Spanish.
This ad's whatever. It's just showing you get... But, like, I mean, it's a great bargain, to be honest with you. They gave away Sega.
Oh, absolutely.
And they actually have a little screen character in the end. So, yeah. What do you think about that? Those ads, that's the marketing this game got. And I feel like the game was popular despite the bad marketing. Like, I feel like if this game would have done so much better if Sega of America even had 10% or even 1% of their Sega Genesis marketing team. They would have knocked it out of the park.
Right. Like, I feel like if I were to pitch an ad to Sega of America, I would say, let's have two kids getting off of school. They see a cop sitting in his car, and they're like, I wonder what his day was like. Because it's like, oh man, school sucked today. I had homework, blah, blah, blah. But I wonder what his day was like. And then, like, the kid goes, oh yeah, I've seen it. And then they, like, do it's like he's played Virtua Cop. And he's like, this is what cops do. And then the other kid's like, are you sure? And then it's like the cops in his car, like, napping, eating donuts, you know? And then the donut says Sega or something stupid. Like, that just feels like something that would come out of that era. And instead it's like black and white cops walking with a second and a half of footage. It's just...
Right. And it's supposed to be like, it's so realistic. And it's like, I don't know, it really made it seem like a horror movie in a way, right? Like, it's black and white.
I just feel like the best Sega ads of that era are, like, featuring kids in kind of like a weird, like, hyper-realism, fisheye lens, kind of cartoony setting, you know, where, like, all cops are fat eating donuts and all kids are hip and cool and all teachers are lame old ladies. And it's like, yeah, they just didn't go there. I feel like the Saturn era was like, we're not going to do what we did for the Genesis. We're not going to have Sonic the Hedgehog. We're not going to have fun ads. We are going to be dark, grim, gritty adult shit with, like, no Sonic.
So let's take a break and look at some of the 3D art assets. I actually screwed up the pictures here, so it's behind the pictures. You see them? Okay. Yeah. So first we got Mr. Rage himself here in his car looking really slick. I think while people make fun of this is actually really high quality 3D renders for 94, 95.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have Smarty Cools drinking coffee. Not very cool, but I mean, I guess he's so cool he has to heat himself up. Them together with their guns. As you could tell, it's actually from the same gun from the German ad with the handhold, the grip has that weird like red finish to it. It's not realistic. And then here we just have the bad guy from stage 1, big muscle man. Now you can compare it to 1995's Toy Story. I put some screenshots here, and as you can tell, a year later. I think it's around the same time they made this. Obviously, Pixar probably worked on this for years, but still, regardless, their human characters were creepy. Even did you notice Toy Story's human characters being so creepy, or is this like a recent thing for new kids?
It didn't really. I never noticed. It never really bothered me because I was watching it at the time, and I knew that 3D graphics were like, still up and coming. Yeah, so I just thought they looked cartoony, but I definitely see that. Like, Toy Story 1 looked very crisp and clean, even though they did use textures that looked a little dirty. And you compare that to Virtua Cop, and yeah, I definitely, it has similar vibes for sure.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. We also have a look at some of the different logos. So the game had different start screen logos. The first one here, let me look it down. So the first one here we have is the Model 2 one, then the Saturn, which changes everything. Like the logo is totally different textured, and the badge in the back is totally different. And the last one is the PC. Not a huge change, really more like the Sega Saturn, just kind of different aspect ratio of the badge. It's less fat. So what do you think? So the real one we're really going to be focusing is the original Model 2 and the Saturn one, since the PC is kind of the same. What do you think is better? Which one do you like better as a designer? Because I feel like the Eagle looks cooler on the arcade Model 2.
Oh yeah, it does change quite a bit. So yeah, you're right. The first one there is an eagle. The second one there really isn't.
That's what I'm saying. It's like
it says special police.
Totally different logo.
The V is a lot more apparent. That is interesting. Why did they do that?
No idea. Like, which one do you prefer?
I prefer the first one because the eagle's at the top, the ivy's coming down, or the leaves, and it just kind of seems like it almost looks like if you fed it into AI and it replicated it, and you're like, what is that shape at the top?
That's what it feels like to me too. Like exactly what I was thinking. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Like there is, like the other one has a defined eagle, and then this one looks like somebody tried to copy it and forgot what an eagle would look like, and they just pasted a bunch of stuff. Yeah,
like just a weird shape. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to replace art assets. Like like I don't know. I thought that was weird.
That is odd.
So let's talk about the legacy of the game. So it was a massive hit, and it revived the light gun genre, which helped spawn other massive hits, including Namco's Time Crisis and Sega's own The House of the Dead series. The game would spawn 2 sequels, the much ported Virtua Cop 2 and the more obscure Virtua Cop 3. Mm-hmm. Which of these 3 Virtua Cops have you played, and which have you played the most, and which one of the 3 have you played the least?
The least would be 3 because it never got a home release.
Right.
The most would be 1.
You could play it on for me it's 1 too. You could play 3, I heard, on a modded Xbox, but I've never done it. But I guess if you really want to play the game on hardware, you could probably emulate it, I'm assuming. So it's not that big a deal. Virtual Cop was also the primary influence for the Nintendo 64 classic first-person shooter GoldenEye 007, which started life as an on-rails railgun shooter. Martin Hollis, designer of GoldenEye, said, "We ended up with innovative gameplay, in part because we had Virtual Cop features in a FPS, a gun that only holds 7 bullets and a reload button. Lots of position-dependent hit animations, innocents you shouldn't kill, and an aiming mode. When you press R in GoldenEye, the game basically switches to a Virtual Cop mode."
Interesting.
Perhaps more importantly, following the lead from Virtual Cop, the game was filled with action. There was lots to do with very few pauses. Have you played? What's your history with GoldenEye 007, and did you ever notice the relations to on-rail shooters?
Well, I love the movie GoldenEye, but being a Sega fan at the time, I didn't own the game. It wasn't until maybe visiting friends I'd play it.
Everyone played it back then.
I never got to play the first-person mode, because whenever you visit friends, they throw on the party mode,
right.
Like multiplayer. It wasn't until just this past year when they put it on the Xbox consoles and Switch that I finally got to try it out, and I really enjoyed it, but I never picked up on that influence, and that kind of explains why I liked it. It's like Virtua Cop first-person shooter. That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, I was not a big Golden. The same reason, because everyone that you played as would put it on like party mode or the multiplayer mode, and then they would be, here's the controller, and then they would like know everything because they've already spent 300 hours on it, and they would just whip you. Them and their brothers would just like kill you, pistol whip you, and you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, dude. I mean, if you know the maps and everything, it's really hard to win in that game, but nothing against GoldenEye. It's an iconic game, obviously inspired by an even more iconic game.
Right.
Sorry, guys. Sega Logistics Service announced that it would end service on Virtua Fighter arcade machines on March 31st, 2017, 23 years after the release of Virtual Cop. That's pretty crazy that they like supported the Virtual Cop machine for 23 years. But
right.
Did you know that the arcade servicing company like Sega offered support for machines this long?
I didn't know that they would announce end of service. I feel like if you call a guy to come out and fix your machine, he wouldn't be like, nope, can't do that one anymore.
I'm assuming that it means March new 31st. Parts?
But that makes sense. Yeah, new parts. That's wild though. That's that's not too long ago.
I thought it was crazy when I was at like the Dreamcast era that you could like call it 1-800-SEGA USA or whatever, and you could order cords for your Mega Drive and Master System. Like I thought that was crazy, and they would send you free adapters or whatever if you like had an order. I think with them, I remember I ordered
right.
I ordered a composite cable or something or some cable, and they gave me an adapter to switch it from I think Model 1 to Model 2. I thought that was interesting, but regardless, Sega used to have a big department of parts. I'm surprised they supported that long though. Mm-hmm. But Virtual Cop would also make cameos in other games like Fighters Mega Mix with Janet from Virtual Cop 2. Feature Virtual Cop 2 billboards in Shimu, and have Virtual Cop 2 in the Smash Pack on Dreamcast, which everyone loves Virtual Cop 2, huh? Ghost Squad would also use the Guardian gun from Virtual Cop, and Ghost Squad Evolution even has a Virtual Cop inspired outfit. Sega Superstars features a Virtual Cop minigame. Wreck-It Ralph by Disney also featured a cabinet of Virtual Cop within the movie. Was it 1 or 2? I don't remember.
I can't remember. I think it's a 1.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, someone remembers Virtual Cop 1. Last year, Sega released a gacha game called 404. Maybe it's not Sega, but they're part of it. And so is Taito and other companies. 404 game Reset, which features a human version of Virtual Cop. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the gacha game is. Am I missing any cameos? And which one do you think of these is the most iconic one that you remember?
I can't think of ones you're missing. I mean, maybe there's references, like things that look like ripoffs of them within like cartoons or something. But I feel like Megamix is the most iconic because it's the first time you really get to play as a character from the game, and it's not just a light gun shooter. I would say the most obscure is the Wreck-It Ralph cameo.
Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph for sure.
I always thought that was really cool.
See, for me, the most iconic one was the Smash Pack, just having the second game there, because it really saved that thing, that release. Like, it's worth owning just for Virtual Cop 2, like literally to play it on your Dreamcast. So that saved that release for me, because a lot of people obviously don't like the emulation on it. So the fact that they had a working 3D game on it, they should have
Sega Swirls on it too.
Hey, I didn't say every game, but that one was on everything. It wasn't like just for that. But it is worth owning for Sega Swirl. I'm giving it its props. I wish they just released a Virtual Cop 1 and 2 on Dreamcast.
And
that would
3.
have been cool. I mean, was it out at the time? I'm not sure if it was out at the time.
That's a good point.
I think it came out in 2003, so a little ahead. Or they could have released Virtual Cop 3, would have been awesome. It is crazy that they sold almost 1 million units and they didn't make a Dreamcast 3 title. Even though the success of Confidential Missions wasn't that big of a success, but House of the Dead 2 was.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so back in the Wii era, you remember the Wii? Mm-hmm. Nightmares?
Got one right over there.
The light gun shooters sort of had a comeback with Sega porting and even making original entries. One of the original Western-made one was The House of the Dead Overkill by Headstrong Games back in 2009. They suggested that they would love to work on a Virtual Cop 4, but obviously it never happened. And Headstrong Games kind of like was pretty big during the Overkill, at least in the Sega scene, and they just kind of went and made a bunch of small sketch games like for iPads and stuff. So that's weird. But regardless, they wanted to do Virtual Cop 4. Never happened. Do you think someone like Headstrong can make a compelling sequel to Sega AM2's classic light gun shooter, or do you think they screw it up? Because a lot of people feel like Overkill was screwed up compared to the original.
I feel like House of the Dead is just like a B-movie, scuzzy, gritty sort of game, so their direction with Overkill worked, in my opinion. But I feel like
cursing movie,
right? Yeah. But I feel like Virtual Cop's just such like a pure AM2 sort of franchise that you really need to approach it from a different perspective. So if they came at it like that and they were like, we're going to emulate like a 90s rail shooter and keep it clean, I think it could work. Honestly, I think what they should have done is a 1 through 3 compilation.
Oh yeah. I didn't really talk about it, but there's a PS2 one, which I do have gameplay of. I guess if you want to look at it real quick before we close it up, I did.
Didn't
forget
we watch
about...
that the PlayStation 2 one just earlier?
No, we didn't. I'm looking at it right here. It's not even been played. Look at the file. It looks totally different. Actually, it's something we should probably just look at, glance at, because this is supposed to be an enhanced remake. It's called Virtua Cop Elite Edition, and they remade the game supposedly on PS2, but it looks so ugly. Like, what is this? Do you have the video up?
We watched that. We just talked about it earlier.
That's a PC one, I think. You're thinking
on PS2?
Long play PS2, the Virtual Cop Elite Edition. Do you have it?
Yeah, I do, but I could have sworn we just talked about that earlier in the show.
This one?
Virtua Cop, yeah.
This is the we talked about the PC version, which is this other one right here.
Oh, okay.
Without sound, and then this one does have sound.
Oh, okay.
But like, I'll send you a video of it real quick on.
No, I'm seeing it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about these models? Like, they say that this is enhanced, but like they don't bounce around like they do on the Saturn. Like the Saturn is ridiculous. Like you could like hit them into combos and they flip around like they got in an explosion. Zero G's. Right. This one, not really. What do you think about that? Like they just fall to the ground like they're like realistic, I guess.
It's pretty weak.
I thought it was weak too. I don't know. This game is actually the rare. It's not that rare, but it's the more costly version of the game, I think, from what I've seen. So it's weird.
Right.
Play the Saturn version. That's the end of the day.
Yeah. And
actually, that's all the notes I have today. Is there anything you want to say about Virtual Cop while we close it down? Besides, play it on Saturn and arcade.
Yeah, play it on Saturn, play it on arcades if you can ever find it. But yeah, it's just an iconic Virtua title. I think it's up there with it's like second to Virtua Fighter and maybe third to Virtua Racing and Tennis.
It's crazy how good Virtual Tennis is. It's like, oh, a tennis game? Ew. And then you play and you're like, a tennis game, yeah.
Oh, you know what? I take that back. Virtua Tennis is second to Virtua Fighter. That's an awesome game. I love the mini games. I actually love Virtua Tennis on Game Boy Advance.
Big Virtual Tennis fan. That's another one that I'm surprised hasn't made a comeback, at least.
I feel like there was a new Virtua Tennis game during the lifespan of our site. Remember that? Virtua 4, yeah, and it was going to be Kinect or PlayStation Move, and then they announced like other platforms and that it was optional, and we were like, thank God. Right.
Yeah, they did move. Yeah, you're right, they did do that. It was weird timing back then on video games, right?
Yeah.
So play Virtual Cop. It's worth it. It's 30 minutes of your day. It's
absolutely
one Simpsons episode. And I think that's the perfect length sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
One sitcom.
Yeah.
And do we have any Patreon memories for this game?
We do. We have a lot of them. So we already read Nicholas Schaefer's, who was our picker, but we also have J.L. Rameau. When I first saw the arcade in downtown Barcelona, I was flabbergasted. I spent a small fortune on it. However, it's the Saturn version that I hold closer to my heart. I bought both Virtua Cop games bundled with pistols so I could play with my friends. I remember a kid in high school who was always making fun of the Saturn, how much it sucked, etc. I invited him over one afternoon, and after playing through both Virtua Cop games, I asked him what were his thoughts on the Saturn, and his answer was as honest as it is revealing so many years later. I didn't know games like this were on the Saturn. I would have invited him over and then beaten him up, but I think...
No violence.
No, okay. I would have justice shot him right in the stomach. He
did kind of beat him up. He did a Segaton Sanshiro where he made him into a Sega fan.
He made him play it. Zachary Ross says, the movie theater in the town near mine is where we went to the cinema. Looking back, we were lucky enough to have several Sega machines, one of which was Virtua Cop. Steep slope sliders was another, and gravitated to that a lot more. As an adult now, and knowing the history behind the series, I appreciate it much more. I have the Saturn boxed version with the light gun. Daniel Andres says, "Oh man, what an awesome and silly game. I absolutely love Virtua Cop 1 and 2. I'm not sure if I've played the arcade version yet. I don't think that I have, but I do own both the first 2 games on Saturn. I also own a light gun for the Saturn to help the experience feel more authentic. And yes, as it may be goofy to have all those hostages be dressed in pure white, it's super helpful in practice and easy on the eyes to tell who to save and who to shoot. Worth noting, though, Daniel, that remember in the final stage, the enemies start dressing all in white, and it gets very confusing.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the white thing. I always just assumed they were in the cult or something, but that's just me.
Ando says, my first light gun shooter ever, and obviously one of my favorite ones. I love the classic AM2 blue sky aesthetic with the vibrant colors and satisfying flashes whenever you shoot an enemy. Unfortunately, not even my CRT supports light guns, so I'll eventually have to hook up one of those new hardware mods to get old guns working on new TVs, eventually. And then lastly, Ben Hayward says, I never played it much myself, but it was a game that me and my friends always thought was the coolest in the arcade. So yeah, a very beloved game, considering all the responses we got. And you can share your memories, too, at any level on Patreon. So if you pledge $1, you can get your foot in the door and have my old voice read your memories.
And what are we covering next time on Sega Talk?
On the next Sega Talk, we are going to be jumping back to the past. It's going to be probably our earliest video game coverage. We're going to be talking about 10 iconic electromechanical games as chosen by our Patreon pickers. So who is that picker? We will reveal next time, and we will share their memories and many more as we talk about games that we can't play because they're gone.
All this and more next time on Sega
Virtua Talk.
Talk. All right, bye.
Bye.